What a mess. I want to pivot into Israel and Iran. So I know the last time you met, or the last time like you were on the show, tensions haven't escalated to the point that it is now. Like now, Iran is involved. Obviously, we can start from the beginning where Israel attacked the Iranian embassy in Damascus. So obviously, Iran responded to that attack. And then now, Israel has responded to Iran. We are now basically seeing what could be a full scale war in the Middle East. It's no longer just about Israel and Gaza. And this is something that I was afraid of. This is why a lot of us were calling for a ceasefire, not just in reference to what's happening to the Palestinian people in Gaza and in the West Bank, but also because we knew that this could escalate to another level here. What do you predict is going to happen going forward? Because a lot of us are aware that Iran does have powerful weapons. And we continue to hear the State Department and people like Antony Blinken say the same rhetoric over and over, that Israel has a right to defend itself. It's funny that Israel does, but nobody else does. Mm-hmm. You notice that? No one else does. But what do you think is going to happen here? Because I'm looking at it as though now there is conflict between Israel and Iran, not just Israel and Gaza. And then I'm thinking about all of the other neighboring countries, right? Because Israel has also attacked Syria and Lebanon. And then you have countries like Jordan and Egypt that are also in the mix here, but they don't seem to want to really get involved. What do you think is going to happen next? And what does this really mean for Israel in the long term, in the grand scheme of things?
Well, prior to this whole exchange, Israel enjoyed what I would call deterrence superiority. And what that means is Israel could do whatever it wanted to do and pay no consequence. It was backed up diplomatically by the United States, and it was backed up by the impression that the Israeli military would bring more harm to any nation attacking Israel than that nation would bring to Israel, tenfold. And so everybody's a little bit afraid. And Israel got away with literal murder. They assassinated Iranian scientists in Tehran. They blew up Iranian nuclear infrastructure inside Iran using covert means. They bombed Iranian positions in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, killing Iranian personnel. And Iran did nothing because the feeling, I think, in the Iranians were that if they responded, Israel would attack Iran and this would get them in a war that they didn't want. But then Israel attacked the consulate. And that was a bridge too far. That was a red line because the consulate, they didn't just kill some senior Iranians. They attacked Iranian soil. By law, by international law, that consulate is the soil of Iran. And the Iranians said, you can't do that. That's our red line. So they had to retaliate, and they did. And this is the scary part, because that retaliation could have been, because if you're going to respond, what you're trying to do is reset deterrence theory. What you're trying to do in responding is put the Israelis on notice that if you ever repeat what you just did, the pain is going to be so great, you're going to regret it instantly. So you have to attack with enough force to make that point, but you don't want to overdo it so that the Israelis feel compelled to hit back with everything they have. Escalation management. The Iranians did this perfectly. First of all, they coordinated with the United States, and they told the United States, stay out of this. And the U.S. said, okay, we will stay out of it. If some of the reports are true, the United States gave Iran permission to attack Israel, saying you can attack as long as you don't attack civilians. The Iranians went, don't worry, we got you on this one. 72 hours notice the Iranians gave the United States and Israel that they were going to attack. That allowed Israel and the United States to build all their defenses up. And then they launched the attack in a very aggressive way, no secret, middle of the morning. When they launched it, they televised the drones going off. And these are very loud drones. So the Israelis had a further 5 to 6 hours waiting for the drones to come to get their defenses in order. And then they televised the launch of the cruise missiles. Then they announced the launch of the ballistic missiles. So the Iranians were doing everything to tell the Israelis, and here comes the next punch, except for the last punch. The last punch was 9 modern Iranian missiles. All 9 of these hit their target. None were shot down. And that was the point the Iranians were trying to make. They were saying, look, you got this defense here. It's all up and running. And we're letting you save face by shooting down drones and everything. But the 9 missiles that you can't shoot down, We sent them out. Yeah, we didn't kill people. We avoided civilians. We blew up a runway. We blew up empty warehouses and all that kind of stuff. But look where we hit. You know, that's exactly where we wanted to hit. And had we adjusted it just a little bit, we could have taken out your command center. We could have taken out your F-35s. We could have taken out your ammunition, your fuel. But we chose not to. We chose to blow up empty buildings. But we penetrated the most heavily defended place on earth when it comes to anti-ballistic missiles. And that's the signal they sent to the Israelis. So now the Israelis are sitting there enraged because nobody's ever attacked them like that since 1991 when Saddam Hussein fired missiles in there. Enraged, and they've got to do something. But America, first of all, said, we're not going to war against Iran on this one. You're on your own. You blew up their consulate. This is on you. And then the Israelis went, but if we start a fight with the Iranians and the Americans aren't there, we may not win this fight. But we have to retaliate. We have to do something. And so it looks like they did a combination of two things. One, they had assets inside Iran that they've used in the past to assassinate scientists, blow up buildings, things of that nature. Release a handful of drones that flew towards an air base and a radar installation, and the Iranians shot these drones down. And that's what the Iranians announced, the drones. Then the Israelis brought in 2 aircraft that flew through Syria into Iraq, and they launched, I think, 2 to 4 Rampage missiles, which is a supersonic, hypersonic missile fired from the aircraft. And these flew in, and these hit 4 targets inside Iran. We don't know what the targets are. Apparently, they weren't that important. They may have been in the desert, just in a pattern. Who knows? But they sent a signal to the Iranians. You couldn't stop this. You know, so we hit you with what we had. You couldn't stop it either. And what the Iranians did is they had said before, if Israel attacks, that immediately they're going to hit back with everything. But instead, the Iranians never talked about the 2 airplanes and the 4 missiles. They talked about the drones that came from inside. And then they said nothing happened. There was no defeat. So the Iranians immediately poo-pooed this story. And even the supreme leader, when he's given an interview, when they talked about hitting the Israelis, said, we're not here to talk about numbers of drones shot down and things like that. That's in the past. We don't want to talk about that anymore. I think both Israel and Iran have said we're not allowing this thing to go any further. We both made our points, and we dodged a bullet. We don't need this larger war, and we're going to stay focused on what we were doing. Israel's going to continue committing genocide in Gaza, and the Iranians are going to continue supporting the axis of resistance, Hamas, Hezbollah, the militias, the Houthi, and they're not going to let this thing spin out of control. So I think we dodged a big bullet, and I think we're actually in a safer place today than we were back when Israel attacked the consulate. Back then, there was a real possibility of, a retaliation turning into a general war. But because of the wisdom of the Iranians, and to some extent the ability of the Israelis to, for once in their life, do the right thing and not escalate, we avoided a major war that would have been devastating for everybody. So this is one of the few times where I feel actually halfway decent about the outcome.
Well, I just wanted to add something that you mentioned there about how Iran made strategic attacks. That just goes to show you that Israel also could have made strategic attacks, but they chose not to, right? So they chose to purposely. That's another thing that people, I think we got to point out, guys, when Israel says we're doing our best to target Hamas. Obviously, we know that's not true, but it just goes to show you Iran showed that example. And it also showed that if we wanted to get through the Iron Dome, we can.
Yes.
So I think that seems like.
Well, it is, but it's more than just the Iron Dome. I mean, understand that the Iron Dome is a U.S.-Israeli system, meaning the Israelis didn't build it. We built it. We paid for it. We designed it. We tested it. It has an Israeli name: Arrow 1, Arrow 2, Iron Dome, David Sling. They're all Israeli missiles, but it was our money, our joint work. But we also overlaid it, our ballistic missile defense system, the THAAD missile with our radars, the Aegis-capable ships with their radars, their ships. All of this was plugged in. This was an American ballistic missile shield over Israel, the same ballistic missile shield that we protect South Korea and Japan with, we protect Europe with. And the Iranians penetrated it, sent 9 missiles all the way through. And now the North Koreans are going, wait a minute, your hypersonics got through? We just tested a hypersonic. You mean our missiles are going to get through too? The Americans don't have a defense against us. And the Russians have been saying that all along, but now they know it. They're going, so our Kinzhal and Zircon missiles, you guys can't touch them. And Europe and NATO is going, we can't touch those missiles. The South Koreans and Japanese are going, we can't touch those missiles. The Taiwanese are saying, we can't touch the Chinese missiles. What the Iranians just did is invalidate over $100 billion worth of anti-ballistic missile defense expenditures, because they showed that whatever defenses are out there today, they can't stop a hypersonic missile.
It is very eye-opening, I think, for a lot of people. One of the things I wanted to bring up too is that obviously you're paying attention to what's happening across the United States right now. You know, multiple college students have decided to protest again in reference to the war in Gaza, but also like setting up the encampments. All the videos that I saw when this started, the students were being peaceful. There's students also here protesting at MIT and Northeastern. Again, these are peaceful assemblies here that are happening. And in some of these cities, the police have been sent in. In New York City, it was actually the president of Columbia University that made the call for the NYPD to come in. I think we all know how the NYPD can be. But then the worst display of this that I've seen so far has been in Texas. And Governor Abbott actually called in the state troopers, and it says state troopers deployed to smash hundreds of Palestine protesters in Texas right now as the student resistance spreads to UT Austin. I want to get your take on this. I'm going to play this like a 90-second vid, and I want you to look at this, Scott. The police showed up in riot gear. In riot gear. These kids are just for everyone to see. Now, in my opinion, this is not necessary. These are kids. I mean, I know they're technically adults, but I still see them as kids. So this is ridiculous. This is over the top. There are also videos that I can't show in here because they're that violent, where I saw them attack journalists. I saw a trooper throw a journalist to the ground, and he had the camera in his hand. I saw professors being shoved to the ground and attacked. I also heard some of these officers repeating the same rhetoric that's coming from mainstream media, that they're all like Hitler, etc. This is really scary to me in reference to free speech and our First Amendment rights. But then also, what do you think this means for Israel? Because it was a couple months ago, there was an article that was released that Joe Biden was trying to basically warn Netanyahu that Israel is starting to lose support, not just from the young people, but just all across the world. And now we see that these college students, they are not willing to back down. And I'm very proud of them. And I think they, have the right idea here. But now it even shows you that even the police, who are often trained by the IDF in Israel, even the police, they're out here again fighting for Israel.
Yeah. No, first of all, every American needs to go reacquaint themselves with what freedom of speech is and what freedom of assembly is, and understand the importance of student demonstrations as representing the moral compass of a nation. Civil rights, people demonstrating in favor of civil rights on campuses, anti-war in Vietnam, a war that today nobody can defend. And the students have every right to protest against genocide. They're not protesting against Jews. There's no violence against Jews. This is a manufactured argument. They're anti-Israel, and they are vocal. And if you're, I guess, a pro-Israeli Zionist, maybe you feel uncomfortable walking around a campus where people are calling out your cause. But there's been no violence. Nobody's beat up a Jew. Nobody's, done anything to Jewish people. This is an absurdity. In America, where we value free speech, let's say that we disagree. Because trust me, there's some protests on campus, and I just go, no, that ain't my cause. That's not going to happen. But all I do on that one is I smile and I turn away and I walk away. I say, that's your thing. I'm over here doing my thing, God bless you, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. You go, you do your thing, but I'm not part of it and I'm not supporting it. That's the way we're supposed to be. I mean, so if I go in New York City and there's something happening in the streets of New York City that I'm uncomfortable with, leave. First of all, nobody's threatening me. I've never been accosted in New York City when there's events going on that I'm not supportive of. I don't accost them. I believe everybody has a right to be who they are. I believe everybody has a right to express how they feel about themselves. And I support that 100%. I would never, ever, ever once in my life say, shut that down. All I'm going to say is, I don't want to be there. I'm uncomfortable. Okay. So respect that. And let me go off in my little, old fat white man space and just let me be who I am. But, but I would never try to shut that down, because America is about freedom of speech, about freedom of assembly. We used to let the KKK hold meetings, and it sickened me. But I was one of the people that said, we have to let them do it, because even though I hate their speech, even though I hate their cause, they have a right. I don't like it, but they have a right to speak. As long as they're not promoting violence and all that, they have a right to speak. And sometimes the best thing to do to destroy a cause is let them speak. Let them be who they are so people can see who they are. And I think that's a reason why the KKK is sort of like going away, hopefully. Because people have seen them for who they are. They say, I despise that. So if let's say I was pro-Israeli on this one, I'm not, but let's say I was. My strategy here would be to say, see who they are, listen to them, see what they're saying. And if I'm right, Americans should listen to that and go, yeah, we're not for that. We're not backing that. The problem with the Israelis is they're saying, listen to what they're saying. Americans go, oh, we're listening to it and we're seeing it and we're on some, and this is why they're shutting it down. This is why the U.S. government's coming in, because what's happening right now is there is a sea change in America. That the American consciousness has been awoken and enraged by the genocide that's taking place against the Palestinian people. And we know who to blame. We know what names to call out. And we are calling out Israel, and we are calling out Zionism, and we are calling out AIPAC, and we are calling out their supporters in Congress who continue to send weapons while children are having their hands tied behind their back and shot and buried in mass graves. Yeah, we're calling it out. And it's scared the establishment, because this isn't just isolated. This is the country awakening. And student campuses, the student bodies they're relatively homogeneous across the country. They might have different letters on their jackets and all this, but students are students are students are students. And American students are waking up to what's going on, and they're waking up. And with them comes the communities, especially, say, more progressive parts of the communities. And that's Joe Biden's bailiwick. That's his voting base, and he's losing them, and it scares him. So he's trying to shut this thing down. If you don't think that these orders are coming out from the highest places, either at the state in Texas from Governor Abbott, because here we have a weird thing in America where Christian evangelicals, Christian Zionists, they call themselves, are very much pro-Israel because they believe in what is it? The term they call it.
It's the statement in the Bible that basically says that Jewish people have to be in the Holy Land in order for
Armageddon to happen. And then but there's a term they use about where everybody goes up to heaven and then stay behind. And there's a whole series of books written about the people that didn't go to heaven, they stay behind. I guess I'd be one of those stay behind people, but who knows? The rapture. There you go. Thank you very much. I was struggling with that word. As you'll find out, Sabrina, as you get older, you'll be struggling with words too. It's just like it's right there. It's right there. I can't get it. So I thank whoever came up with that. But the rapture. So we have a weird thing in the United States where we have progressives who are supporting Israel and we have conservatives who support Israel, and they're both scared to death because the base of population that they thought would be with them, they're disgusted by what they see. They're alarmed by what they see, this genocide, and so they're awakening. So they're shutting it down. I would ask everybody in your audience to look up Kent State and see what happened at Kent State, and ask yourself, do you want that to happen? And it wasn't just Kent State. and again, you're going to have to forgive me, because at the same day there was another shooting at a black college for the same thing. The black students came out against the war, and the police and the cops came down and they shot people. But because it happened in the 60s and black people weren't considered to be quite the same as white people, the dead white people got on the front page of Life magazine and not the dead black students. But there was two colleges at the same time where they had these anti-war things, and the police and the state troopers came out and shot them. That's the direction we're heading here, ladies and gentlemen. That's the direction we're heading. We're heading to where students are going to be killed on campus for speaking out against bad policy. That's not a death sentence.
And by the way, 3 of the students that were killed during the Kent State massacre were Jewish, by the way, for people who are not aware.
Right. And I think 2 of them weren't even part of the demonstration. They were just going to class. They were just basically, bam, bullet hits them, dead. Get that. I don't want to use bad language on your show, so I'm going to respect you. Get the cops off the campus. If the kids start burning things, look what they did in Vietnam. They took over presidents' offices. They took over things. It was a heck of a lot more interactive than it is right now. But it played itself out. Generally speaking, when people start talking to you and start acknowledging, give you a right to speak, it dissipates. But here they're afraid to engage, because how can you defend genocide? How can you defend it? You can't defend it. It's indefensible. So rather than just say we're wrong, they say bring in the cops. And I'm telling you right now, I am very afraid, because this isn't going away. It's blowing up on campuses all over the country. All the students are starting to rally around the cause, and I'm just really concerned that some stupid governor is going to call in the National Guard. These guys who were trained to go murder Iraq. I'm sorry, National Guard, but you lost my respect. You guys, bomb wedding parties in Afghanistan. You kicked down doors and terrorized Iraqi families. You weren't over there defending democracy, defending freedom. You did some really bad stuff, and you guys know you did some really bad stuff. And now you've come back here with that skill set, that antisocial behavior that's ingrained in you are, and then we're going to put you on a college campus and give you guns and ammunition and put you up against our students? Hell no. It can't happen, but it's going to. And we'll be playing Crosby, Still, Nash and Young, Ohio all over again.
Yeah, I think some people may not realize that, but when they call in the National Guard, that's not to make peace. That's actually to take action and to escalate the situation. I could see Ron DeSantis doing that, Scott.
I can see DeSantis. I can see Abbott doing it. And the thing about it, too, is that, like at Kent State, what they acknowledge is the National Guard guys, they were scared themselves. They weren't well trained. And so, the only thing more dangerous than a scared cop with a gun is a scared National Guardsman with a gun, because the scared National Guardsman's gun is more powerful, can do a lot more damage. This is a bad day for America. I mean, sometimes we have to suffer as a nation to learn and to improve. But man, the suffering hurts. The suffering's bad. And I'm just afraid that in order to turn the corner on this issue, there may be some tragedy attached to it. And I hope not. And I hope that we can get enough people to, weigh in on this. Did you see the one? She was an economy professor, and one of her students was being beaten up by the cops. And all she did is said, why are you doing this to him? She didn't touch a cop. She wasn't anywhere near a cop. And then this stupid burly guy came in, arrested her, and then they George Floyd her.
Yep.
Put her on the ground and put the knee on her neck. And I'm like, you guys haven't learned a damn thing. First of all, she's a female economy professor. She's not carrying anything. Why are you using this force on her? Why are you treating her like these? This is why. And they were sergeants. They wore sergeant stripes, so they should know better. Cops don't know better. Cops are trained to do one thing: beat people up and shoot people. We don't have smart cops anymore. I'm sure somewhere in some town they're going to say, I live in Bethlehem, New York. We have some smart cops. Want to know why? Because our community makes them be smart. Our community actually holds them to account when they do things. when I was a firefighter, I'd respond in the ambulance to DUI calls. And man, you never saw more respectful cops in your life when they pulled over some DUI people, because that was a citizen. And even though they were going to get arrested, and even though they were going to get fingerprinted, and even though they were going to get, man, it was the most polite thing in the world, kid gloves, all this kind of stuff, because the community holds them to account. But I also saw them treat people who weren't of the community. I don't know, like the black kid walking over from Albany across the Delaware Avenue Bridge into all-white Delmar and being pulled over by a cop saying, "What are you doing in Delmar?" What do you mean? What do you mean? It's America. Delmar isn't your own city. I'm an American citizen walking in America. Yeah, but you don't belong here. What do you mean I don't belong here? You're talking back to me, boy. Bam, 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 bam. And next thing you know, you got a beat up black kid in the lockup. Yeah, Bethlehem cops can be that bad too. But you know, our cops aren't well trained, especially when it comes to use of force. And a lot of them come from the military, where they've been traumatized, where they've been conditioned to do really bad things. Word of advice to all city planners out there: in your police department, never give a veteran's preference again. In fact, make military service automatically disqualifying. If you ever served in the military, you can never be a cop in America, because cops aren't supposed to think like you've been trained to think. Cops are supposed to think differently. The American people aren't the enemy. You're not going out on patrol against the enemy. You're not driving through hostile territory. You're driving through somebody's neighborhood. You're driving through a hometown populated by American citizens whom you're supposed to protect. But that's not the thinking. They come out, they think they're back in Baghdad. They think they're back in, in Kabul. They're going out on patrol. They're gearing up. There's the enemy out there. I'm going to get these guys. And they do. And now they're going on college campuses and taking down students whose job it is to challenge everything. That's what a college kid's supposed to do. Go there and challenge everything. You want to teach people to be critical thinkers. You should be applauding them for what they're doing. Applauding them. It's a learning experience to sit there and say, and man, how do you get a civic-minded? You know, there's so many Americans just unplugged from civil life. Go out and you get your job. You go to work. You come home, and you just don't care about what's going on. You've unplugged because you're overworked and all that stuff. These kids are out there. They're engaged. They're doing what American citizens should be doing, engaging, holding people to account. That's what America's about. And we're sending in cops to beat them up. And soon we're going to send in the National Guard to shoot them.
And the other thing I want to say with this particular population, this is the population or the age group that is typically recruited by the military, and military recruitment is down in the United States. That's another thing I think that, it's very different than when you joined, than when my dad joined. Like now people have a very different mindset about joining the military. And I want to ask your question about that. And then one more after this one, which is, what do you think about this statement that Joe Biden made a couple of days ago that they may have to send in U.S. troops into Israel? How do you feel about that? And considering that military recruitment has decreased, do you have this any insight or any intuition that the U.S. government could possibly implement the draft again?
I don't know if the American people are so zombified as to tolerate a draft when there's not a need. Let's put it this way. If Russia or China attacked us today, I don't think you'd have to have a draft. I think every American would go out and volunteer to defend their country. If people are coming across the border doing harm to the American people, we'd be there because we love our country. But the military has been destroyed in terms of being seen as the American people as a viable institution of American values, because all we do is invade countries. All we do is kill people. We go overseas, and it's not about improving life here at home. It's about bullying people, imposing our will. It's not even about fighting terrorism, we found out, because, we're not killing terrorists. We're just killing innocent men and women and children who are in their home in a village in a land that we don't understand culturally. We don't speak the language. We view them as the enemy because they view us as the occupier, because we are the occupier. And so it's very difficult right now. And also it's about motivation. I would imagine if your father is roughly my age, that he joined for patriotic reasons. That he got up one morning and said, I'm going to serve my country. I'm serving America. Now, it's also employment. You get a paycheck, but you don't get a big paycheck. I didn't get a big paycheck. You got paid so you could, but I joined to serve my country. I put myself at the service of my nation. And that's a whole different mindset than saying I'm unemployed. I have no other options. Okay, I'm going to go in the military and I'm going to get 3 hots and a cot and maybe a GI Bill so I can go to college when this is done. But you're not joining, because you want to be in the military. You're joining because you have no other options. That's the option of last resort. And the level of motivation for those, and you're joining in hopes that you don't get deployed. Whereas when I joined, I know, Sabrina, you're going to get angry at me. I prayed for war every single second I was in the military. Get him off the air! He's a bastard. But I joined, and I was trained to a certain skill set, and I'm like, let me do it. Let me do it. Let me do what I'm trained to do. Let me do. Today, I'm a different thing. Like, I'd like to imagine people joining the military, becoming the best trained people in the world, and never using it. Wouldn't that be nice? But back then, I was, until I went to war, I wanted to go to war. And once I went to war, I never wanted to go to war again, because you quickly learn that it ain't what it's not what Hollywood says it is. But the mindset was leaning forward. Today, if you're leaning forward, I'm afraid of the people that are leaning forward, because we've also lowered the standards. I actually had to go through some very serious, testing and psychological batteries and test after test after test after test, with doctors looking at you, checking boxes. You ever seen that movie, The Right Stuff? You know how the astronauts were getting tested before they went up the Mercury? That's what it felt like in the early 1980s, going into the Marine Corps Officer Commissioning Program, just testing, just winnowing people out so that the only people left were people that met the standard that you wanted. Today, we don't do any of that. Basically, if you got a pulse, you're in. And now if you got people leaning forward, wanting to kill, why? To serve your country, to fight the enemy? Or are you just a psychopath who wants to go and kill people? And I'm concerned right now that a lot of the people that are leaning forward saying they want to go kill are just psychopaths. And then the beauty of it is, when they leave the military, they join the police.
Yep.
They're psychopaths leaning in, wanting to kill the enemy, which is the American people. But no, there's a reason why the U.S. Army is having a recruiting problem, because there's a lack of motivation. I think the only branch that's not having a recruiting problem right now is the Marine Corps, because the Marine Corps still puts itself up as a higher standard. We don't lower our standards. So when you want to join the Marines, you know what you're getting in. But even the Marine Corps has changed fundamentally. I heard they have yellow cards for timeouts. I mean, I couldn't imagine, timeout. Can't yell at me anymore. I got a timeout card. Man, if I pulled a timeout card back then, boom, 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 kick me to the ground, beat me up, timeout, yeah. No, but I'm not saying that that's the right way to train. I'm just saying that was the way they trained us back then, was a lot of hands-on love. But not today, a timeout card and all that kind of stuff. Maybe it's better, but the military today is not the military of the past. Different levels of motivation. A lot of it is based upon the concept of a job, not an adventure, a paycheck, and the kind of things that you'd be asked to do in war is an inconvenience. And now imagine taking this army, this military, and telling them, you're not going to Iraq where you get to kick down doors and, kill civilians. We're sending you to Ukraine, where we're going to lose 3,000 guys in 4 days. And you said, but sir, our unit's only 5,000 strong. Welcome to the real war, buddy. You're all going to die. And can you imagine them back then going, because I have to tell you, when we were trained to fight the Soviets, I was the intelligence officer, and I would tell my guys, if we go up against the Soviets, we're all going to die. That's just the way it is. They got a bigger army, more artillery, and in the end, we're going to die. And the Marines are like, all right, but we'll take some out before we go down. We'll make this a fight. Today, I can't imagine people going, oh, okay, we'll make a fight. There we go. What about my college education? I signed up for the college degree program, and I'm going to die. You can't kill me.
Right.
And I wasn't so. In order to pay my bills, I got a second job at Home Depot on the weekends. And if you send me off to war, how am I going to have that second job? You're not supposed to have a second job. You're in the military. But then I can't afford the car payment on the Camaro I bought. And all. I think the motivation today, and I know there's going to be a lot of people that are mad at me because they did join up for patriotic reasons. I'm not saying that they don't exist. I'm saying that of the majority of American soldiers out there today, that motivation is not there. And there's a reason why the U.S. Army was 15,000 short on their recruiting goal last year, because nobody wants to join the Army, the Navy, or the Air Force today.
You're right. One more question for you, Scott. What if we could have an even bigger movement? What if we could take, this movement here, the pro-Palestine movement, minus the police, if we could take all of those kids at the college campuses and everybody else that's out in the street, marching for the Palestinian people. And then we could also take all the people that are tired of this war in Ukraine, right? This is where I would push on people that are part of the Freedom Caucus, that people like MTG, who's tired of all this money going to Ukraine, to mobilize people within her own district, her own constituency, and get them out in the streets. What if we had a group of people that were against the war in Ukraine actually merged with the people who were against the war in Gaza? That could actually probably get us to that 5%, which they say you need to have like a massive movement in this country. What would you think about something like that? And then it would just be a big anti-war movement.
I told you that I went to Russia back in May. That was part of a campaign. I actually spoke at a restaurant in New York City in December of 2022. And at the time, I was very worried about nuclear war. I just wrote a book about my time as a weapons inspector in the Soviet Union, getting rid of nuclear weapons. And I took a look at what was going on and, how we're actually starting to emphasize nuclear weapons and stuff. And so in there, I said, in the treaty that I was part of, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, was signed by Ronald Reagan in December of 1987. Ronald Reagan was a staunch anti-communist. I mean, if you go and look at his record, he's no, tree hugging, arms control kind of guy. He's the guy that made a joke, thought he was off campus, about, well, Orby, the missiles are flying. They'll be in your territory in 20 minutes or something like that. So he joked about nuclear war, but he signed it. Why? In June of 1982, 1 million people took to the streets in Central Park in New York City. 1 million people from all over America. And they came together for one thing, and one thing only: to say no to nuclear war. To say no to nuclear war. And that voice, what they did, woke up the political possibilities. It took a guy like Ronald Reagan, who said, my people want me to think about nuclear disarmament. And 5 years later, he signed the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. It began a process that led to this arch conservative guy signing a treaty that got rid of nuclear weapons. I mentioned that at the time, and I said, we need to do that again. In June of 2024, on the eve of a presidential elections, we need 1 million people in the streets of Central Park protesting against nuclear war, not against, protesting for disarmament. I'm tired of the protesting against things. What are we here for? We're here for nuclear disarmament. We're here for peace. We're here, for, peaceful coexistence. And I went out and I worked hard for that. There was a movement, the Rage Against the War Machine rally in February, and they were supposed to bring everybody together. And the problem is, you can't bring everybody together. At least it hasn't been shown. Most of the classic peace movements avoided that rally because they said, well, no, that's not what we're about. Within that rally, people came in from different political spectrums and they started fighting against one another, and the rally wasn't nearly as effective, and they had to postpone the second one because it fizzled out. Sabrina, we need this. We have to have this. If we can't put 1 million people in Central Park, we're never going to achieve anything. If we can't put 1 million people in Washington, D.C., surrounding the Lincoln Memorial, going down the mall towards Congress, pack that with 1 million people. If we can't replicate what Martin Luther King was able to do for the civil rights movement, then we're not going to be able to save it. What do I think about it? We have to do it. But how? How's the question? How do we get people to put aside their petty differences? Because at the end of the day, I don't care if you're a libertarian. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're a communist. I don't care any of that stuff. All I care about is that you are pro-disarmament or pro-peace. And if we can come together as Americans and say we've put aside our petty differences, we're now working together, like the American citizens we should be, yeah, we could do this. But how do we do it? I mean, I have to tell you, I'm demoralized by this, because I thought for sure I could get the American public to wake up about nuclear war. Nobody takes it seriously. And when they do talk about it, they're like, yeah, we can win that. No, you can't. You can't win nuclear war. We learned that one. When I grew up, we learned you can't win nuclear war. That's why getting rid of nuclear weapons was a good thing. War is bad. How do we tell people war is bad? When I grew up, there was enough survivors of World War II who would just sit there and go, yeah, war's pretty bad. We're with you. There was enough Vietnam vet guys who were still, limber enough to be out there. War's bad. War's bad. Today, we have a bunch of, disgruntled global war on terrorism guys. Some of them are saying war is bad, but most of them are just like, man, let's go out there and kill more terrorists. Let's go out and do this. So the military is not, the military is not on our side. The military is not saying, yeah, man, we don't need to be doing that. How do we do it, Sabrina? There's the ultimate challenge. I mean, I'm with you. I tell you what, if you and I and others could get Danny Haifong, if we could get Max Blumenthal, we can get Aaron Mate, we can get all these people and their respective audiences together. If we could put 1 million people in New York City, in Central Park, if we could put 1 million people in the mall, if we could have put 1 million people in San Francisco, this is a nation of 320, 330 million people. If we can get enough people mobilized just to say, we believe in peace, give peace a chance, we could do something. But how do we get 1 million people to do that? How do we get them to wake up one day and say, I want to go to, again, I bring back the 60s songs with Joni Mitchell. By the time we got to Woodstock, we were 500,000 strong. That's just people walking, baby. All we have to do is get people one day to say, I'm going to New York City. I'm going to Central Park. I'm going to Washington, D.C. And, if we can get the permits, we get the permits. If not, flood the damn city anyways. Just flood it, shut it down. Didn't they used to, wasn't there this thing they called a flash mob? Like you put it on the phone, but people show up, a flash mob. Let's flash mob Washington, D.C. Let's flash mob Central Park. It doesn't need a permit. We're just going to say, I want everybody in this area to show up on this day and just stand there and make a point. Stand there and make a point. We're shutting the city down. We're making a point for peace. Do it to Washington, D.C. Do it to San Francisco. Shut it down. Shut her down. Can we do it? I'd like to believe we could. I don't know. Maybe you have better ideas. I'm not, me and my flash mob idea, who knows? That's probably the dumbest idea in the world. But come up with a better idea.
No, I think these are all really good points. I mean, even during the civil rights movement, they didn't have a lot of the resources that we do have. There was no internet, there was no Twitter, no Facebook or anything like that. They were able to mobilize simply by calling people on the phone, and getting thousands of people out in the street. And so I think it's just, I totally hear you. I totally hear you. Well, Scott, thank you so much. Anything coming up that people should know about?
Nope, just a trip. We're going to make a documentary about it. It's going to be a pretty cool documentary. And so later on, we're going to start putting out requests for support, because documentaries don't make themselves. And even though we're going to go over there, we're going to capture on film, there's these creatures called film editors, and they charge a lot of money. And then the guys who do the music charge money. And so we will be putting out appeals for support on that. But I think it's a worthy cause. And like I said, this is going to be a cool trip. This is going to be one of these feel good trips where when when you come back, you're going to say, I actually made a difference, because we are going to have an actual impact on people's lives. We're going to bring people together. We're going to try and tear down walls of ignorance, walls of fear, and bring people together and begin this dialogue and this communications that is absolutely necessary for Americans and Russians to relearn how to live in peace and harmony.
All right, Scott Ritter, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye-bye.